We're here with Ekua Adisa to have a conversation about modern witches and what they are and how we relate to them and how we identify as spiritual people. So
Mhm.
I'm really grateful to have you here to have this conversation.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited.
And I would love to have you introduce yourself, share a little bit about you and your work.
Cool, yes. Let's see. So I'm Ekua. I use they, them pronouns. I am really deeply influenced by my ancestors, by African descendant ancestors in particular, and also African descendant ancestors of the US South. I'm very strongly influenced by hoodoo, being an African descended person from the South. I'm also really influenced by Cherokee and Lakota indigenous people and traditions that I've been invited to participate in. I love supporting people to connect with their ancestors and deepen a relationship with their ancestors for guidance. I'm a diviner. I'm an intuitive medium, so I talk to spirits of all kinds. And I'm really jazzed in my work right now about working with grief, collectively, individually, and in different kinds of affinity groups. So we're working with Black folks around generational and ancestral grief, working with queer folks, working with gender fluid and expansive folks, working with people of the South, working interculturally amongst people of color, and then cross-culturally and interculturally amongst Black folks and white folks, to really foster and generate some big ripples around like generational healing. Um, that is what I'm really excited about right now.
Yes, your workshop at the Convergence was so powerful. I just
Mhm.
want to say thank you so much for being a part of it. It really shifted a lot for a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'm excited to have this conversation because I think I've been just having conversations with a lot of our teachers about what a witch is.
Mhm.
And I'm curious to know um, if you identify with that word or if there's another word that feels analogous to you that you feel you identify with in terms of a magical practitioner.
Mhm. I have a lot to say about this. I used to identify as a witch when I was younger, when I was maybe like a teenager, 18, 19, and I was just getting into working with altars and realizing that I could talk to spirits. And I was like, oh, I'm a witch. I'm a witch. And I think that there are some people, some folks, some ancestors in my lineage who that word relates to, but many of them were like, okay, you'll get it soon. Like you'll get it, you'll fill it out a bit more. Um, but I these days identify as a medicine person. And I think that because I am a person who works um, at the intersection of so many traditions, as a person of the diaspora, as a person who is a descendant of enslaved Africans, not necessarily having access to specific cultural traditions, but having access to more of a broader idea and context of African spiritual traditions. And being influenced again by North American indigenous folks. Um, Thinking about my work as medicine work is feels the most true, and it feels the most accessible to all of the energies that I work with, for
Mm.
sure. Yeah.
That's
um,
a beautiful way to think about it. I think, finding a word that resonates not just with you and your own living body in this moment, but also that resonates with the work that your ancestors did.
mhm. Yeah, so I think that a witch, in the way that it's used colloquially, I think I do fall under that category in the ways that we talk about it. And I think it's someone who has either naturally enhanced abilities or abilities cultivated through practice that allow them to manipulate reality. And I think that everyone manipulates reality all the time, but a witch will do it on purpose and with dramatic effects. I also think that witches are often women, femmes, or gender expansive people. And I think witches are also often working in service to their community, in service to marginalized people, or working as healers or medicine people. And I think that there's so many ways that looks. And I think that there's also sometimes a disservice because there is an idea like, oh, a witch must do X, or, and so people often are disempowered from being able to embrace their own role. But, witches can work with plants, words, incantations, do spell work with elements, work with animals, work with elevated spirits, work with ancestors. Witches can be intuitive, psychic, can be diviners and work with runes or cards or read tea leaves or bones or stones, depending on where, that person is coming from culturally. And I think it's so funny. Before this conversation, I was like looking at definitions, of witch, and it's always got this this lens of evil, or malignancy. And I think that the myth of witch as inherently evil comes from, the patriarchal suppression and perversion of the erotic. And when I'm thinking and speaking of the erotic, I want to have a footnote, see Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, her essay. But yes, the suppression and perversion of the erotic, of the feminine, and of women specifically. I think that's where that comes from. And I also think that African descended people hold a really unique place in this definition, because African spiritual traditions have always been considered inherently evil by patriarchal and Christian colonial forces. And I think that speaks to the inherent power of African traditional and spiritual practices, that it needed to be suppressed in such a foundational and fundamental way that still persists.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so interesting. I was thinking about, I was reading your website before this conversation, and I saw that a big influence of yours is Zora Neale Hurston.
Oh, yeah.
And their anthropological work. And I think what you bring up is so important because witches are people of service, and they're people who, the dominant paradigm have been afraid of because of their connection to their aliveness and the eroticism of the earth and nature. Yes. Do you find yourself in your practice kind of like peeling back layers, of what has been overlaid on certain spiritual practices over the years, in terms of what the predominant paradigm has tried to sell us or perpetuate about certain systems and beliefs?
I think there's a way that I'm not necessarily peeling back layers, but I'm offering it in this radical way that is just the root without the layers. And so I think that I'm always interested in how that's received, because sometimes people who are not Black will assume that I don't work with them, like I won't work with them, which I don't say that anywhere on my on my website, even though my work is very Black centered, because I'm a Black person and I'm working out of my ancestral lineages. And so I find that to be very interesting, how folks will feel naturally exclude themselves. But I think that it's powerful to offer my medicine in a way that is really honest and true to the lineages that I come from and the lineages that I'm influenced by. And really just the earth itself, like really like the medicine that the earth is inviting me to offer. And I think that it's it's specifically really alive in my grief work, as well as I think about moving grief out of the body being a way to really activate and make more space for the proliferation of erotic energy and erotic power in the body. Um, and that just being something that like blows people's minds, like even the idea of that, because the suppression has been so severe and, hundreds of years at this point. But I'm really excited because I think that we're really in a time of awakening
Mm-hmm.
on the planet. And I think that there's no better time in history to be a witch, to be a medicine person than right now.
I love that. I think that's true too.
Mm-hmm.
To get back to the root of it too, I did want to ask, how did you come to your connection with spirit? What was, was there a defining moment or a teacher or a lesson that kind of came to you that helped you find your way?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it had a lot to do with making a choice to live in a way that would support me to heal trauma. And I think that for me, because it was a big crossroad in my life, it was like I was either going to continue to attend college and push through the debilitating depression and PTSD that I was experiencing, or I was going to have to stop what I was doing and figure something else out, which was completely unknown and mysterious, and I didn't know what that thing would be. But I made the latter choice. I was like, I gotta stop. I gotta drop out. I don't know what this is, but I'm feeling suicidal. They're not helping me here, and I gotta figure something else out for myself. And so I left school and I saw this commercial to go to like this massage school. It was like the school is called Rising Spirit. And I was like, Rising Spirit, yes, I feel drawn to that. And it was the first step that really set me on a path um, that is still unfolding to deep healing, ancestral healing, not only just my own personal trauma, but collective trauma and ancestral trauma. Particularly, I think about collective sexual trauma, because that is something that so many people experience, and it is not something that is often um, worked on in the context of healing in a collective way.
Mm.
But it is something that we can definitely work on transmuting sexual trauma into sexual power in a collective way. That's something that I really became aware of through my own moving forward toward that healing for myself. I did encounter a teacher in my early 20s who I won't name, but I learned a lot from her in terms of just reconnecting to the medicine of my ancestors, thinking about, and she really like helped me to validate a lot of my ability and my ability to communicate with spirits, and really nurtured that in a way. She really like put me in the place of understanding that I could work with plants because of who my ancestors are. That I didn't need to go to a school to put put a leaf in water and pray over it. I didn't need to figure out how, I didn't need to have all of the scientific Western linear intellectual understanding in order to make medicine. And I really appreciate that work with her. I also learned a lot about myself and energy work, and just like this kind of way of like intersecting modalities, like, right? So like I may be doing, energy work for someone, but I'm also working with these crystals, and I'm also working with their guides to do exactly what they need, not doing it from my own mind. And so that was a really big, um, mind-blowing, expansive time for me. Even though I eventually realized that this teacher that I was working with was homophobic. I was like, oh yes, there are different aspects of my experience that are not able to be embraced in all of these different healing spaces that I traverse. And so, yeah, it really, that experience, it forced me to rely more heavily on my own ancestors. And it's something that my ancestors have been pretty consistent about since I could hear them. They're like, you know what? I know you feel attracted to, what these Ifa folks are doing, and you have had, communications with Orishas, and you think maybe you need to get initiated. No. They're like, no, don't do it. Don't go work with those people. They got a lot going on, but just work with us for now. When it's time for you to engage in a level of initiation at that level, it will be clear. And so I have just so much trust and faith in my elevated guides and the ways that they have guided me. But I will also name that I did do some collective ritual work with Sabongfu Somé while she was living. She transitioned in 2017, but she's from Burkina Faso, the Gara tribe there, and she traveled all around the world helping people remember how to use ritual for healing, particularly grief ritual, in community. And I learned so much from her about that, and participating in ritual with her in community on 2 separate occasions. And it really helped me understand like the difference between depression and overloaded grief, and how the two are connected, and how having so much grief in the body, compacted grief, being full of grief, can create an experience of depression and can influence mental health in a way that, and physical health in ways that could lead to death even. And so I feel really grateful for the ways that I was able to learn from her and with her in community, and the ways that I'm able to carry on her work now. She was really not able to work with like groups of African descended people because white people were the ones who had resources and institutions to be able to pay for her travel and bring her out. And she worked with a lot of white people, but she really wanted to return these teachings to African descended people as well. So she was always really excited to see Black folks when they would be in these spaces, which would be predominantly white. And so I'm really grateful to be able to continue to work with her as an ancestor and to kind of be carrying some of her work forward, in my own flavor, my own style. But yeah, I really, really am so grateful to have learned with her.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's I appreciate your reflection, because I think it's so important for folks to remember that, the journey is always unfolding, and that if you're rooted in an ancestral connection, um, you can kind of draw on these threads that might be more authentic to your path and your purpose and the healing work that you're meant to be doing. And able to kind of create your own path and your own rituals and systems.
Exactly. I always tell people, clients, folks that I'm talking to, like, I could tell you something, I could tell you how to use a medicine or something, but this is what my ancestors told me. So you got to kind of really take it through, your own lens of what do your ancestors say about this this plant or this ritual or how to do it. You know, there's so many, you know, folks who I think are afraid of tapping into their ancestors for whatever reason. Maybe they have people in their family who did harm, or maybe because of cultural lineages or historical lineages, they feel like, oh, you know, my people were colonists or my people were enslavers or whatever the case may be. But we all have ancestors that are really committed to our well-being, to our healing, particularly ancestors who did significant harm. They're going to work the hardest to create repair, you know, for what they did to balance that energy. So I just wanted to say that because I hear that so much from folks. Like, everybody got ancestors that want to work, and we have to put them to work, you know.
I love that perspective. I've never heard that put that way, that the ancestors that may have caused the most harm in their lifetime want to work harder to rebalance their energy. That really resonates, because I definitely have problematic ancestors, you know, by the thousands. And there are some in particular that keep showing up, and my resistance to them is what I know of them in their lifetime and what they did. But they're probably showing up because they want to do better, do right their wrongs. So
yeah, they want to help. And, you know, people who are living in bodies are not the same when they transition. You know, when we return to source, when we return to the truth of all, you know, all of this, and remember all of the truth of who we are and all of the lives we've lived, and we're like, damn, I can't believe that I did all those things. Wow. Okay, so let me get to work in this plane, you know. And so I think that we have to remember that we're humans, but our ancestors are not humans anymore. You know? So yeah,
does feel super important. I'm wondering, as part of this interview, I'm asking everyone if there's some piece of advice that you would maybe give to someone who feels like lost in their spiritual practice.
Well, two things are coming up for me. The first thing is to return to your ancestors. And I think that, you know, that's something that's easy for me to say. But I think that even if it feels challenging to connect outside of oneself with ancestors, it's important to remember that our ancestors are us, literally. They are our bodies. That's how they show up. They're in our DNA. So I often tell folks, you know, if you feel like you need to connect, you need to feel guided, you need to feel cared for, give it to yourself, give it to your own body, you know, give yourself a bath, give yourself some pleasure, give yourself, you know, some deep care. And that is a way, and eat good, you know, eat good, eat things that are delicious, and give yourself things that feel really good, because I think that that is a way that we can be making offering to our ancestors, because they are literally embodied in our physical bodies. This body is the first altar, you know. And so I think that that's really important. And then the second thing is to reconnect with the earth itself. I think that, you know, even as simple as just sitting outside on the bare ground, on the earth for a bit each day, and asking, you know, just asking for whatever it is. You know, I need guidance about X, or I don't know what to do about Y, or I feel lost, please show me, you know, please help me. I think that it's really powerful to think about the earth as a parent energy. A lot of folks think about the earth as, a lot of cultures think about the earth as mother, as great mother. And that resonates with me sometimes, but also sometimes the earth feels masculine. So, you know, parents, whatever the case may be. But I think that the earth is a powerful guide that can really give us so much, whether it be through plants that come up on our path, or even just like something beautiful, like a beautiful view that we can look at that can really just reset our perspective. And I've had that experience so many times. And I also think that this connection between ancestor and nature, and ancestor and earth, is very fluid. You know, I think oftentimes when we are not able to receive messages from ancestors through our intuition, they will come through nature, because that's the next best thing, the next closest element that we can access. And then, you know, if you don't listen, then you know, ancestors will start tapping on people like me. But you know, I think that just really tuning into and inviting your ancestors' help, inviting your ancestors' support, and being willing to receive it. And also making space for deepening and connection with nature, I think is really helpful for anyone who feels lost.
Yes, I sometimes think about, you know, the land that my ancestors tended to or lived on, and like the water they drank and the food they ate, and it is so connected.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, I have to ask this question. I think it's kind of a funny question, but I like to see what comes up from it. Um, what do you think magic is?
Hmm. I think magic is life force. I think that it's actually very it's not that special. It's not that, like, you know, like um what's the word? It's very normal. Magic is very normal. And I think that being able to be aware of magic as it happens is what is less normal,
Mhm.
because we're so socialized to be so distracted and to be so disconnected from ourselves. But magic is happening all the time. And I think about when I, for example, meet someone and I feel sparks and I feel this energy. And when I'm paying attention, I might be able to notice that my ancestors are like, hey, pay attention to that person. And I might be able to notice that I have a connection that feels beyond this time with this person that I don't even know. You know, I think that is kind of one of the ways that like magic can be happening in these like mundane moments and ways, and we don't pay attention, or we do pay attention. You know, I think
Mhm.
even just looking at how plants grow, that shit is magic. You know, like
Totally.
thinking about the rose. Okay, I'm in love with rose. Like thinking about
Mm,
the way that it smells and how that can impact my ability to feel love and care for myself. That's magic. You know, how I feel when I look at something beautiful in nature and how that can heal me emotionally. That's magic. Like how lavender oil can stop an anxiety attack in its tracks. That's magic. You know, I think that yeah, you know, being able to put all of these different elements together in spells, and you know, use words to create reality, and you know, influence someone else's will, like, yeah, all of that's cool. And you know, it's not it's not the it's not the point. It's not the point. The point is to be able to really see and witness and experience the magic in each moment unfolding.
mm. Fully agree with that. It's like where there's like a counter spell that has been cast on us
Mm-hmm.
by the patriarchy and white supremacy and the dominant cultural norms that we're all just Like if you're a witch or you're a magical being, you're a medicine person,
Mhm.
it's like you see right through that spell and you see the magic and you're with the magic all the time.
Yeah. Or, there's a lot of folks who are inclined, medicine people, witches, who are under that spell. And then, you know, I get a lot of them in my as clients, and they're like, I don't know why, I just felt drawn to book a session with you. I'm like, that's because your ancestors want you to wake up and
Mm,
do the work that is yours to do. And I think that's also something that's really happening in a mass level and scale right now, is people who are naturally have these abilities. um you know, our guides are like, hey, it's time to activate, we got work to do, like all hands on deck.
hmm
I think that that's a reason why I also feel like it's a really great time to be alive, even though, there's a lot of challenging things happening on the planet, but there's also this really fertile energy to be coming together with other spiritual folks and community, other medicine folks, which is coming together in ways that I don't think happened in the past in such a way. So I think it's really powerful time of awakening.
Mm, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So where is your magic leading you these days?
Um, my magic is leading me out of city centers and to be really reconnecting with the land, with plants, with nature, with fundamental skills and tools, and ultimately to be able to make spaces, physical spaces, but also all kinds of spaces for people to have the ability to be still, to rest, to
Mm,
get quiet, to listen to themselves. And I'm grateful that my ancestors have guided me in a way that allows me to be living my life in that way right now. I don't even really know how. I'm just like, I don't work for anyone else. I spend my days however I want to spend my days. I offer care and service to other people, and this is my life. And so I think that through being able to say yes and listen to the ways that they've guided me up till now, it's really guiding me toward being able to enhance that work, being able to have space where I can invite people and my family to come and do nothing, just rest, just be,
mm,
especially for African descended people, people who are descended of enslaved people who didn't have the opportunity to rest. I think it's just really significant generational healing work, is to be able to make space for Black folks to rest.
absolutely. What a beautiful affirmation of saying yes, and to just being like, the word trust feels so big right now, in everything that you're saying, and that's not an easy thing to do.
It's really not. It's
Yeah.
really not, especially when we're so programmed into capitalism, and into just like this idea of this is the way that a life is supposed to look. You're supposed to work, you're supposed to buy a house, you're supposed to, do all this work and then retire for a little bit. At the end of your life, maybe you can have a little bit of rest. That is like literally the programming that I'm having to work against.
Mm,
Um, it's a daily um, struggle sometimes to even not feel guilty about
right.
resting. Yeah.
So real. I mean, I think like there's been a lot of talk about how um yeah, where our bodies were meant to experience leisure and pleasure and not just hardwired for labor and production. And it's amazing that you're able to find places to embody that and also provide it for other people.
Mm-hmm. I'm grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you. Um, this has been such an inspiring conversation, and I'd love it if you could share where folks could learn from you, work with you.
Yes, of course. You can find me on my website, ekuaadisa.com, EKUAADISA.com. You can also find me on Instagram. That is Ekua Adisa, at Ekua Adisa. You can also find me on Patreon, where I offer exclusive things. And that is patreon.com/Ekua Adisa.
We'll put all that in our clickable links area. Is there anything else you want to share before we close?
You know, I was thinking about the idea of like a modern witch.
Yeah.
You know? And one thing I wanted to say about that is I think that like in this modern time, like I think a modern witch is like someone who is cultivating their abilities through an appropriate cultural lens. You know, it's not about like you know, appropriating different magical abilities and tools and things to have fun. It's about really being in integrity. I think that that is something that feels like a new imperative for a lot of folks these days. And I also think that modern witches are really adept at working in these modern digital contexts. You know, like one of my favorite things is like the evil eye emoji and how people use that, and think about protection from online hexing, because when you're online, so many people are seeing you and looking at you, and if you're thriving, you know, people are going to intentionally and unintentionally send you negative energy, and that has an impact. And you know, I think that modern witches are really adept at dealing with that, you know. And also aesthetics, you know, there's just like a way that I think the concept of a witch or even a healer used to be very drab or just very like goth, you know, exclusively. But I think that style and fashion have become a big part of what differentiates modern witches from witches of the past.
Thank you for pulling up that thread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Modern witches. I mean, I'm just constantly blown away by the fact that, you know, it's been how many years since we've had like Instagram, the internet, like 20 years, and it's created this sort of like revolution of magical people seeking each other out and weaving these crazy webs all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a blessing, and I think that it's also, you know, asking that we rethink about our magic and how to work it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's beautiful how like there's easy access to each other. So this collectivity, this ability to come together to conjure what is needed for the collective good. I'm thinking about just different things that have happened, and like just like this, you know, witches coming together to hex, you know, 45, or like thinking about, you know, just all of the things that have been made possible in this modern age that wasn't possible in the past, where there's these little pockets of folks or people in the South in the country, you know, doing their things with the plants. But yeah, we have access to each other, and so we can work together. And I think that that is, again, another reason why it's just a really great time to be alive and to be awake to who we are.
Yeah, I think it was Jung who said something like, you know, if you find yourself alive in like an incredibly tumultuous and point of crisis, it's because you're meant to be here, like managing that crisis, managing what is being experienced. I think that's really true.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing and just being present with us today. It's again, it's really such a blessing to hear your perspective, and I know folks will really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Of course.